Joining me now from Southern California, retired Lieutenant Commander, U.S. Navy, former Navy SEAL, and author of the book, First, Fast, Fearless, How to Lead Like a Navy SEAL, Iron Ed Hiner. Iron Ed, military rules of engagement versus what it's actually like on the battlefield. I want to go to that first.
Okay.
In particular, I would imagine 99% of Americans don't know what it's like to be shot at.
Yeah, I would imagine they're not, and I hope they don't ever find out what it's like to be shot at. So it's a little bit scary.
It's not a comfortable thing. And,
No.
and obviously, when you're doing your duty in Iraq, many times you're going to come under fire.
You're definitely going to come under fire, and sometimes it's random fire, sometimes it's direct fire, sometimes it's IEDs, rockets, so it's a very scary place.
On the other hand, the military is all about rules, right? You have to have the hierarchy in place, and you've got to follow the command, and you've got to follow the rules, right?
We do. We have to have battlefield honor, and rules of engagement are part of that. But there's a lot of gray area inside of those rules of engagement. The rules of engagement often switch from battlefield to battlefield.
For example, rules of engagement, at one time, I believe during the Obama administration, maybe even during the Bush administration, was you can't fire your firearm until you're fired upon?
That has happened in the past, and then years before that, there were times we were firing upon people just with cell phones or binoculars. They're spotters. So it's a lot of discretion on the battlefield. Most of the time, 99% of the time, the guys have made the right choice, and they've seen hostile intent or hostile action.
But with that kind of policy in place, we never would have won World War II. Let's face it, right? You can't fire until you're fired upon?
Absolutely not. That's a defensive posture, and special operations aren't a defensive posture, so we're not used to that.
All right, Eddie Gallagher, the Navy SEAL, who's in the crosshairs right now, out of the brig, but he's still in the crosshairs of a possible course-martial, Mosul 2017. Tell me in a nutshell what happened.
Well, that was a battlefield unlike most we've seen since 9/11. It was a medieval battlefield. The beheadings, there are factories where they were gutting children. Eddie had seen all this. It was a massive medieval fight, and the enemy was all over the place. They had taken over the city, and Eddie was out there scrapping it out with coalition forces and partner forces, Iraqi forces, to gain back the city. And General Mattis said, take off the gloves, and these guys were out there street fighting. So, and it was a very bad place.
In other words, there's every man for himself in a sense, right? I mean, you're putting your life on the line. And we should mention that Mosul was liberated in the previous war. And so these guys were in there liberating it again, which is the irony of the situation. So he encounters terrorists or a terrorist, and then what happened? What is his account of what happened?
Well, first, everyone's a civilian out there. No one wears a uniform. Unfortunately, we don't see people in uniform. But they had been firefighting this building for a long period of time, and there were about 50 holed-up ISIS fighters in there. They sent 2 Hellfire missiles into the building, trying to kill every single person in the building. They were successful, except for the one person that lived through it, the ISIS fighter that we've all seen the videos of. And as he pulled him out and took him back to the back of the lines, you can see in the video where Eddie Gallagher himself, which is an 18 Delta Corpsman, which he can do battlefield surgery, was treating the wounded ISIS fighter. So he was actually doing the opposite of what they're saying he was doing. That's why Duncan Hunter, the congressman, and the other congressmen have watched this video, and they realize that this is exculpatory information. This is information that will free Eddie as far as these charges.
Yet he's charged with premeditated murder. So how do you go from trying to render assistance to being charged with premeditated murder? Well,
that's a good question, and I think that's the question everyone's asking is, they're just a couple accusers bringing this forth, which, they have their motives. But Eddie Gallagher, the people that have seen him there, saw him on the battlefield, they realized he did not stab this guy, and the guy died on his own.
The prosecutor in this case, who has since been removed and did some rather nefarious things, do you believe that he's part of a holdover, a kind of an enclave from the previous administration?
Well, he definitely is. The intent of the last administration, as we've seen in Afghanistan and Iraq, was to kind of put the gloves on for the American forces, and that intent coming down from the head shed generally becomes general orders when it comes 2 or 3 ranks down. So I believe it is a holdover. The last Admiral Crawford also put Eddie in prison, also wrongfully convicted Senior Chief Barry on a sexual assault, and he's been acquitted since he served his time in prison.
Now, Eddie Gallagher, though, was recently released from prison, and he was held there for many months.
Yes, he was, like 7 months in confinement. He was in isolation, shackled. He was treated like a common criminal. He was in with rapists, pedophiles, with convicted criminals, where Eddie's a highly decorated Navy SEAL. Yeah. And that's, that's the reason, one of the reasons the prosecutor, Cizaplak, has been fired. The assistant prosecutor was a Marine, and the Marine Corps has since pulled him off the case. They didn't want anything to do with it because they realize what this is.
The case of Eddie Gallagher has caught the attention of the gentleman in the Oval Office, and President Trump has said, effectively that he's waiting to see what happens with the trial, which, by the way, there could be dismissed at some point, but he's waiting to see what happens, and then?
Well, we've heard a lot of rumors, and we've heard a lot of people in a lot of powerful positions talking about a possible pardon. But, I think there's no way, if Eddie has to go to court, there's no way they're going to prosecute him. They're going to see that it's ridiculous. The prosecutor has spied on the defense. They put spyware in the defense emails and tracked the defense and his defense, so he has not had a fair trial. So I think they're going to find this out. If they don't dismiss it, there's no way he's going to be prosecuted for killing an ISIS prisoner.
So how does this shake out in your mind? If they do dismiss, if they don't, if he gets pardoned, if he doesn't, what does this do in terms of the ramifications for future warriors, future Navy SEALs out there on the ground in Iraq, or who knows? At some point we may go into Iran. What does it mean for the future of these warriors on the ground?
Well, they're the last of the meat eaters, and I've told you that it's going to cause them to hesitate, and you don't want to hesitate in those situations. You want to know that your country has your back when you're fighting, and I'm not saying we're out there committing war crimes or murdering prisoners, but you have to have discretion, and the benefit of the doubt has to go to the warfighter. So right now, in the SEAL teams, there are a lot of people really not interested in going down range and fighting just due to this.
Yeah, you hesitate, it could cost you, easily could cost you your life. Do me a favor. Yeah. Iron Ed, would you pass on to Eddie Gallagher that when all this is over, we'd like to have him on the program?
I absolutely will, and he really appreciates it, and his family really appreciates you keeping this issue on top of the game here. So.
All right, Iron Ed, thank you.
Thank you.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.